Welcome, everybody, to tonight's podcast. Hey, Maryke, how's it going?
Hi, Carter. Good, and you?
Good, good. Yeah, it's been an interesting week, and it's been an interesting life and everything, especially now with communism on the rise. And just when we thought we'll get away from communism, we bring you more communism, but on a galactic scale.
And it's sadly not entirely fictional. And sometimes fact is stranger than fiction.
Yes, for sure, for sure. How's everyone doing tonight? I see we've got Gentle, Count, Hale, and David, third. Excellent.
And Jeannie. Hello, Jeannie.
Let's see here. There we go. So, Maryke, you're the guest tonight. I don't know if our guests mostly know you from Paratus, where you are a gunslinging and as you actually have a lightsaber as well. So you're a gunslinging, lightsaber slinging lady. Should definitely put that on later. But most people don't know that you actually are I think the background kind of says it all. You are an avid sci-fi fan. So please do tell the audience a bit more.
Well, I guess it's from my sciencey background. I've always been, into science, and science fiction. Also, I like the idea of big bad spaceships going out into space, exploring, taking humanity further than just the boundaries of the Earth. I did study physics and mathematics at university, and science fiction has just always been my favorite genre. It's very friendly on the imagination. It's a very rich environment because specifically you are not bound to the Earth. It's not the confines of the Earth. It's not the past. It's not what's going on now. It's in the future, maybe the near future, the far future, or the very far future. So it's wide open. I prefer science fiction to fantasy. Fantasy is a bit too airy-fairy for my taste. No, way out there. Take me to the stars and I'll be happy.
Yes. You'd rather fly away in a spaceship than on a dragon, I take it then.
Yes.
That was not a trick question, Maryke.
I'm pretty sure I will be able to fly my own spaceship. I'm not sure if I can tame my own dragon.
Yes, that's probably true. I think it's a bit of it's a much more complex undertaking, most likely, because in all the books and literature that I've read and seen, dragons don't tend to be kind. They're not like donkeys. They just don't pull up and let you ride them. You have to kind of work for it first. Yes. So yeah, for sure. So I think in South Africa specifically, and anyone can maybe argue with me on this, with the current trajectory of our country and the EFF and the ANC, I think everyone kind of wished that communism wasn't a thing. And then, strangely enough, when you start looking and actually seeing, look into these movies and novels, there's a few themes that are quite interesting that I think from the earlier works up to modern ones. And I think we're going to touch on a few of them today. So Maryke, if you want to kick that off.
Yeah, so this whole thing started at the beginning of the lockdown, if I remember correctly. All of this was way too familiar, the government intervention in people's lives and the total control freakishness that they had going on, and the people turning on one another. And I was like, no, but I've seen this before. And then I realized, because of all these books that I've been reading and the audiobooks I've been listening to, and obviously the quick fix or the movies and the TV shows, that's a thing. that is a recurring theme in science fiction, is government overreach, authoritarian control, controlling people, government lies, obviously. Population control was another thing, and harsh measures for breaking the law. And that's when I, started thinking back towards all the books that I've read, and it's like, well, this has been coming from George Orwell's time, who wrote 1984 somewhere in the 1950s. And Animal Farm, he obviously tried to warn the people about, this evil system called socialism. But way back when, communism was the actual, die rooi gevaar. It was a thing, and the West was terrified of the Reds coming to take over their civilization. It was a thing to be fought tooth and nail. Communism was not to be allowed in a Western civilization. And, well, if you look back now, it might seem that they did win, but when you think about it, communism is still there. It didn't die out. It's been dressed up in nice words and fancy clothes. And
a few of those maybe.
People think it's gone, and they don't take it seriously now, because they're so caught up with, we're getting free stuff this, and it's going to bring us peace, and people are out of control. We need more government intervention to keep the people in line. And we all have seen what happens when you give the government more and more power. They just don't give it back. And at the beginning of the lockdown, I made a post on my town's Facebook group, what Emperor Palpatine said to Anakin when he was still the Chancellor. He said, all those who gain power are afraid to lose it, even the Jedi. So if you give good guys too much power, they're not going to want to give it up. But if you give a bad guy power, he's definitely not going to give it up. And that's what we're seeing now. It's more and more and more power that the ANC is taking for itself. And people are just going for it.
So for the people that are maybe listening, Count von Toffenkopf has a very valid question. He asks for El Presidente on here. Thoughts on Jar Jar Binks and midi-chlorians?
Midi-chlorians.
Sorry. My sci-fi tongue got twisted there. Well, if you want to answer the Count there, you're more than welcome to.
There's a theory that Jar Jar Binks is actually the Sith Lord that we've all been looking for. It makes sense if you actually think about it. But no, Jar Jar was there for comic relief, and midi-chlorians was a lazy way to explain the Force. That was just a writer's shortcut to explain something magical.
Wow. Rightio, myth busted. Thanks, Maryke. do we actually see? Yes.
If we go back to Jar Jar, I also used Jar Jar in a meme earlier. In the beginning of the lockdown, I memed the scene in Attack of the Clones where he said, Misa proposed that the Senate give immediately emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor, and the people were cheering. And that is exactly what you shouldn't do. And I said, don't be a Jar Jar. And we've got a lot of Jar Jars around us because everybody is just like, more government, more government, more government. No, we need the government to save us. And that's where we are now.
Yeah, that's always been a very strange one for me. It's like, let's ask our oppressors to lend us a hand. And I'm just like, that won't fucking end well. It never kind of does. You don't ask Darth Vader for a handout why would you ask the ANC for one? It's perplex. It perplexes me to no end. So on that note then, is there, in most science fiction, so while we're talking about communism, I think you've got Star Trek, where you've got the Jedis, you've got the rebellions, and they
That's
kind of
Star Wars.
Thank you, idiot me. Thanks. Sorry, guys. Yeah, my bad. It's been a long day. I've been doing tenders against my will, so forgive me. Okay, so you've got that. Is there big themes of anarchism somewhere in science fiction as well, where anarchy, or there's still a struggling small pocket of anarchists trying to stand up against the man? Because we see that in Star Wars, in Star Wars, and many others, where there's a small resistance remaining, and they're up against these epic odds.
Yes, but that's usually only after the bad guys have won. I mean, the Rebel Alliance was formed after Palpatine came to power. So that's when they came together. When I think of anarchy, I immediately think of Firefly, where they had this war between the Browncoats and, I forgot the bad guy's name, the Alliance or something. So the Browncoats lost, and China basically won, because everything is in Chinese in Firefly, and they speak a few words of Chinese. So they are basically the anarchists, the Browncoats, the people that don't want to be ruled. But because they lost, they are still under the authority of the Alliance. Maybe DNA can help me with the bad guy's name, the Chinese people. I don't remember their names. So everywhere in Firefly, there are these people that don't quite follow the Alliance's rules, and they are basically outcasts. So they are on the outskirts of the galaxy. They continuously have to fight off Alliance people. And obviously the main crew in Firefly is a bunch of space cowboys. That's basically what they are: the smugglers, space cowboys, mercenaries, whatever you need them to be. And Firefly was definitely awesome. It's like the best 10 episodes that you can ever watch.
And they pulled it. I hate it when they do that. I still have to watch it, but yeah, I'll give it a watch. Then you just touched on it. So usually what we see is the forms. It's the either a federation or different what do they call them, sects or factions. So in these galaxies and galactic setups, you get the different factions. Now they're either driven by some kind of ideology or a need to collect the most advanced technology from ancient civilizations, or all of them have a different kind of story that they follow. You maybe touch on a few of the more fascinating sects you've seen in science fiction and how they operate, and then just kind of a short summary of the societal structure that they follow. Are they kind of free, open market, open trading? Are they communist bastards? What's their vibe?
On TV or in book?
Any. I don't discriminate.
Because the non-communism thing that I can think of now was a TV show called was it Dark Matter? It's also a bunch of space pirates, and the galaxy is ruled by three. No, that was it was Dark Matter. 3 corporations. So there were these 3 powerful corporations that were continuously battling each other for technology and domination over a planet or a sector of the galaxy. And the one with the most money obviously wins, because this one can buy off that one and can put in more money into research. So that's definitely not a communistic setup, and that's basically every man for himself in the lower classes. Obviously, you have your corporate elite. You're going to get them everywhere. Everywhere, there's somebody is in charge.
There's galactic Zuckerbergs and Gates and yeah.
Yes. And then the lower class people, they live in relative poverty, and protein basically does not exist. There's synthetic meat, or it's either made of yeast or bugs or grubs, worms.
Can I just on that note, Maryke, just jump in? I don't think the people from the East and the Boots would appreciate the future without protein, Boots. I think they'll...
there are no cows. Well, there was even in that TV series Flash, the recent one, the guy that came from the future, he was like eating a cheeseburger, and he said, "Oh, there's no more cows where I come from." So that's something else that they play with, is the kind of diet that people have to eat. It's laboratory based. One of the stories I read was they made so much yeast that they can genetically modify yeast to be a tomato or a steak or a patty or a bread, whatever they wanted it to be, and they can give it different flavors and different textures, because yeast is everything, and there are too many people, too many mouths to feed. So food from a lab, that's another thing.
Another thing that I see as well, Maryke, sorry, modern breakthroughs. I see there's a lot of research going into algae as well, actually growing and making algae edible. And that also seems to be a new research stream, which is quite fascinating. And you're right. If you are going to explore space, or you send the first few people up there, it's basically going to be very brutal basic stuff. Maybe a bit of aeroponics, because I know the ISS, the International Space Station, they were the first kind of vegetable growers, or aeroponics in space was on the International Space Station, where they actually had aeroponics, which is where hydroponics is usually water, the roots are suspended in water nutrition. Aeroponics use a very fine mix. So it has a nozzle that sprays small water mist in intervals onto the roots. So it aerates the roots, and the water that it sprays also has nutrients in it to feed the plants. So you basically have plants growing without soil, and they're suspended in a medium. So these are all ways that we're going to basically recycle and go to space. We're going to reuse everything, and even the water, the vapor, and urine will be recycled. And you're going to reuse it as water. So it's going to be these closed systems where nothing actually goes to waste, or you've got minimal waste, but you recycle and upcycle pretty much everything, especially if you're starting out with a new colony. And then another interesting aspect is the 3D printers. So you'll have 3D printers that can print in a lot of different materials. So you can print metallic objects, you can print plastic ones, PVC, maybe even glass. So you have that utility, because you won't have, when you're in space, or if you're colonizing Mars, you won't have the facilities available that you have on Earth. So a lot of R&D needs to go into 3D printing. So if something breaks and I need to repair something, I can actually print it. So I'm going up there with a lot of material and a lot of schematics. So that's just my little my 5 cents.
If you have extensive experience in 3D printing, SpaceX is looking for 3D printing people to help them print parts for their spaceship.
That's pretty cool. Are they actively recruiting now? Well, I want to, if we want to get out of South Africa, once our Scorched Earth policy is completely taken over, I think we can all just kind of go there, no? Why not?
No, somebody should tell them that the Scorched Earth policy is a colonist trick.
Yeah.
It's a dirty colonist trick.
And it never ends well.
No. No, it never ends well. Speaking of Scorched Earth, the book Fahrenheit 451 deals specifically with a fireman whose sole purpose was to destroy books. So in the universe created by Fahrenheit 451, the government did not like the people to read. They did not like the people to think. So they basically took away anything that could make people want to question the government. And obviously, there's somebody who does not agree. So there's somebody that hides away books and somebody that teaches the firemen that there's actually more to life than just doing what the government tells you to do. So
who would have thought?
Fire is generally used for bad stuff. I told someone today the only good reason to start a fire is to have a bride. And even then the fire can get out of hand and burn somebody's house down. So fire is definitely not something to be messed with.
Or to propel a rocket.
But is that a good thing? Where's the rocket going? Where's it going to land?
On the Thule house.
It will just be a happy little accident.
It was. I took my hands out of the control for 1 second and the Thule house blew up. So that would be a very unfortunate incident. Very unfortunate. So any mad rocket scientists out there, please don't do that ever. So
and there's definitely not instructions on the internet for how to build a rocket.
That can blow up.
So don't even try to search for it. Never. Because there's definitely.
This show takes no responsibility for mad rocket scientists blowing up the Thule house. Just a disclaimer. There it is. We've indemnified ourselves. Maryke, we're good.
We're good. Yes.
Then, Maryke, there was another question that I had. Celestial themes in these sci-fi stories. I don't know if the ones that you do where it's celestial beings or interdimensional beings interacting with different dimensions. I think one of my all-time favorite, it was a story about Fringe. Fringe was one of my all-time favorite series. It's basically our world and a parallel universe, and the one guy wanted his son back.
I've never seen that.
You need to watch it. It's fantastic. So the guy in our timeline basically loses his son. He builds a time machine. He goes into another dimension and steals his son that's still alive in that dimension. That creates a ripple in space and time and kind of fucks up that entire timeline. And these weird anomalies start in their timeline. And then later in the story, weird shit starts happening in our timeline. Then these weird bros, men in black, show up. They're bold. They're very emotionless. And then later in the story, spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear this, they're us from the future with chips built in. # Elon Musk. So they've got chips in their brains. They're emotionless, but they're vastly superior intellectually. But yeah, and there's lots of other plot lines. And then the characters meet themselves from the alternate universes and they kind of collide. It's quite incredible. It's really, really one of my all-time favorite sci-fi shows.
Time travel is another thing. I'm just trying to think about the interdimensional beings. There was one or two by Isaac Asimov. I think it was called The Gods Themselves. But that book is not, it doesn't translate so well into an audiobook because there's a specific format. It follows like 4 different timelines, but there's some kind of alien interdimensional being. And what if they the humans. There was an experiment on Earth about trying to open a portal into another dimension to get energy, unlimited energy from that. And this portal would have tapped into these aliens' universe. So they were stealing energy from them to power the Earth. And so there's these intertwining timelines about how the one scientist is trying to stop it and the alien is trying to stop it. So it's you actually have to focus on that, but that wasn't a kind of aliens coming to Earth, making contact, first contact kind of thing. It was more like a philosophical thing about, with great power comes great responsibility. So if you tap into another galaxy or another dimension's energy and you steal their energy and you cause those beings to die, what right do you have to kill them to power your own planet? Is that justified? If your planet is dying because there are too many people and they can't run all the replicators or whatever, is it justified to steal energy from somewhere else? Even if you don't know what is on the other side. So
I think it's justified if you are Eskom, because they really need a helping hand, even if it's from a different dimension, because they're so cuck. Eskom is probably the worst in known this universe and parallel universes at generating power. So,
but I mean, if you knew that Eskom was draining power from another dimension where they are actually killing those species, is that cool?
Move. No, it's a dick move.
No, I don't think that's cool. No, humans should sort out their own problems and not interfere with, other people's lives. But if you don't know where your energy is coming from, oh well.
There we go.
If nobody has come to stop you from the future, is it really such a bad idea?
Like Eskom most days, on good days, don't know where the energy is coming from. They're just like, oh, this generator is offline, or this. But what do they call it? It's not a generator. It's this unit. It's these fuck off big things at not Kuberg. Anyway, they lose generating capacity. It has a name, but anyway, someone can throw it into the comments later. Okay, back to the topic at hand. Totalitarian themes, Marxism. Let it rip, Maryke.
I think the most famous one might be Ender's Game. Well, which I can think of at the moment, because there was a movie about it, and it's also a great series within the science fiction community. And in Ender's Game, the aliens, the buggers, they come to Earth, and I think they actually did attack Earth. The book starts near the end of the war, so the entire book follows Ender, which is this child prodigy, and Earth. All the governments of the Earth have stopped fighting with each other, so they all have united in an effort to fight the aliens. Okay, so obviously on Earth now we can't do it because there's no aliens. So we try to fight climate change. It didn't bring the people together. Now we're fighting COVID, which seems to actually bring the governments together. So yay. It's not aliens, it's COVID. It's a stupid, silly virus. So in Ender's Game, you have the one world government, and there's collaboration between all the countries sending their people to fight the buggers. So the Earth was losing the war, and they realized that children are actually more susceptible to new training methods, and when you start teaching them young, you can mold their minds, because children also see things differently, so they can be more innovative in trying to find to solve problems. So there was Ender, this child prodigy that saw things in a different way. And if you read the book or watched the movie, you will know how it ends. But the thing that stuck with me in Ender's Game, specifically now during all this stuff that we were having, is there's this scene in the movie and in the books where Ender is cornered by a bunch of bullies, the head bullies and his minions. And Ender starts fighting back. I mean, Ender is the small guy and he's nerdy and he's also a third child. In the universe of Ender's Game, the people were only allowed to have 2 children. That's what they got. Population control. The Earth was overpopulated, so you only get 2 children, and for the third one, you have to apply a special license for it. You get taxed and whatever. So Ender grew up with this whole thing of, he's putting a strain on society, and he's not actually supposed to be there, but his parents wanted them. They had privilege, so so they were granted permission to have a third child. So Ender, got some issues, and he was bullied because he was a third. So there the bullies corner him. He's fighting back. The minions run away, and the big bully keeps on going. And eventually, Ender has this guy on the ground, and Ender keeps on kicking and punching, and he keeps on going and he keeps on going until security shows up. So this was in the military school. So afterwards, he was interviewed by the general and the psychologist, and they wanted to know, well, why didn't you stop fighting when your enemy was down? And Ender said, I didn't want to win just this fight. I wanted to win all the future fights as well. And in light of what's going on, I'm going to leave that there. But basically, people need to take responsibility for their own safety, basically, and not wait for security to show up, because you are your own first responder. Okay, anyway, back to the aliens. Yes, there's a lot of themes in novels and movies that we seem to find admirable in fictional characters, but not so much admirable in real life. I mean, today, if you keep fighting a guy that's down, you get into a lot of trouble. You're just supposed to stop the attack and not go on. This philosophy of trying to prevent all future attacks is not going to work. Yet that was what won the war in the Ender's Game series. That ability to think, 10, 12, 15 steps ahead. So Ender's Game has this one world government with one enemy, and there's also that philosophical question about when do you actually stop fighting your enemy? Because if you've seen the movie or read the books, you would know that the buggers were actually retreating, and the point in the book was to hit the buggers at home. So the aliens, they went home and they did their own thing. They realized that they were beaten, and Earth just kept on going and building up their defenses and training more people, and eventually they attacked the aliens for no good reason, because the aliens weren't, they were pacified, they weren't aggressive. So once again, there's that human thing trying to interfere with something else. There's an overreaction towards a non-existing threat, which is basically what we're seeing with COVID.
Yes. Interesting thing, Maryke. We're talking about COVID as well, and being responsible. Every time we send something up to space, I don't know if you probably know this because you're into science. They actually sanitize the shit out of everything before they send it up. So we don't take pathogens and anything up into space, or we don't like land a probe on the moon with some of our shit on that and disturb the balance. What is that whole process called? Is it I know it's decontamination, but probably has a specific title. So the scientists are very weary. Like if they send something up or something comes back, it gets cleaned up to the brim and sanitized before they actually take it out, unless they're willingly taking samples. Like on Mars, the rovers actually, it's taking and testing soil samples and rocks and all manner of things, which is quite interesting. And they're trying, obviously, the ideal recipe would be if whatever they're using to take the samples, it can actually test it right there and then. So we can get the chemical composition of whatever's up there. And then we can also look for the markers of life, or life that has gone by. I mean, maybe millions of years ago, there was life. So we'll be able to pick this up. So that's quite fascinating in that regard, that we actually have come a far way. And I think with the advent of SpaceX, for me, is very exciting, because we used to have few and far in between rockets going up because it was fucking expensive. And everyone said, you can't reuse a rocket. And along comes Musk. You can't have an electric car. And the rest is history. Yeah, round two, fight. And I think from a technological perspective, I mean, this has been in the last not even decade, we've seen a hell of a jump. And now all manner of, well, some known, some are confidential space missions are happening in orbit and beyond. I know, is it China or Japan has also sent a rover to the moon with full HD, like it's very detailed footage from the moon, and it's a rover that you can tune into as well. So it is an age that's kind of brought back optimism. And I remember in the spacefaring age, when we landed on the moon and all of these fun things, that next generation that actually saw that, we saw a hell of a soar in the STEM and science subjects. And it was an entire generation that went into that field, and they became astronauts and they studied science. It's direct proportional to the people that were still kids then, and they became adults and they went into these fields. And then it's as if the funding dried up and we kind of lost our enthusiasm for space, because it's kind of like been there, done the t-shirt. But what people don't know is a lot of the technology we get, freeze-dried food, some of our alloys, even your rehydration sachets, a lot of that stuff are spin-offs from space research and radio technology especially. Many technologies. I don't know what your favorites are, but there's quite a few of them. And a lot of people don't know that. They're like, oh no, why aren't we feeding the poor people in Africa? You know, fuck. Like, yeah, let's get something where we can have aeroponics, like the US used in the Iran war, where it's a desert. They set up this tent and they're growing fresh vegetables in the middle of a desert. What's Israel as well? They're quite well developed. They've got these wheat fields in the middle of the desert, also hydroponics, aeroponics.
Yes.
And these are all spin-offs from space technology. And a lot of people don't know that. They think we just invented it. It's like, no, GPS technology is one of the best ones. So yeah, my 5 cents on that.
Radar was invented in World War II.
Say radar again.
Radar.
I love it when you say radar.
So yeah, wars, and well, you can argue that the space race was just because of the Cold War. So wars bring technology,
yes.
coded messages, and like radar and aeroplanes. Submarines, torpedoes, those things, and all of those things have different applications. You don't just have to use one thing for that specific thing. You can repurpose it and play with it and make something useful. And as for feeding the poor people, that is what Star Trek managed. They found a way to replicate food. out of thin air. They 3D printed food, and they basically solved the poverty and hunger problem on Earth, which is why Star Trek is basically your perfect socialist system. People don't have proper jobs. They don't need to work because you've got your little replicator that gives you food. So why you don't need to work to pay for food? And that's when I realized this. I was never the biggest Star Trek fan. I was always into Star Wars. So it can either be one or the other. If you're like a really hardcore, you can't have both. It's one or the other. So yeah, in the beginning of the year, I was watching Deep Space Nine because I wanted to watch all the Star Trek shows just to say that I don't actually like it, and I don't actually like it. But in Deep Space Nine, it becomes very obvious how they are trying to intermingle the humans and the aliens, and everybody's on this spaceship, and you don't actually there's no real commerce because you're provided for. You've got your housing, you get your food. There's the Ferengi, which I think are the capitalists of the Star Trek universe, and they are portrayed as greedy, greedy bastards. Greedy, unscrupulous, money-loving bastards that will do anything to make a quick buck.
Modern-day capitalists.
They are basically the capitalists of the Star Trek universe, and they are actually despised for it. They've got these 100 and something rules of acquisition, which is the steps you have to take to, get rich. And they trade in this specific metal. It starts with an L. Latinum. That's like their gold bars.
It's like lacquer platinum. Just lacquer and platinum.
So yeah, they actually got the bar on the space station, but people don't like them because they are after money and they're trying to swindle everybody. So they're basically the bad guys. They're actually neutral, but people see them as disgusting. So yeah, Star Trek definitely has very strong socialist overtones, especially with all those, we bring peace and we want to incorporate you into the Federation. There's the Federation of Planets, and they basically prescribe to all the planets, what to do. And I watched Picard this week, the latest Star Trek offering, and it was just like, it's not great. There was also this thing about who gets to live and who gets to die, and the Federation said, no, they have full power to decide who gets to live and who gets to die, and if they decide that an entire planet should be destroyed, then so be it. They make the decisions. People can't decide for themselves.
Maryke, you touched on something earlier. I just want to bring it back to reality. There is this weird notion these days, speaking of evil capitalism, that it's fucking terrible to do well in society and actually make a success of yourself and actually move forward in a materialistic way. The far left especially, it demonizes it, and they want everyone to be taxed equally, which means shit high above 50%. If I'm not mistaken, Joe Biden in New York and some areas, they want to actually push up taxes for the rich. If you earn more than, I think, $400,000 a year, they want to push it up to 62 or 65 fucking percent. I'm like, that is ridiculous. The state is in no way capable of driving wealth or creating more jobs or redistributing that money in any way better than the free market can. So for me, it's like, wow, that's terrible. And ironically, for decades now, these blue states have actually lost a lot of rich people because they're like, are you fucking out of your minds? You're taxing the shit out of us.
Yes.
And they just go to the red states that are much more business friendly. Now, if you could take South Africa and you could actually make, if we also had a federated system where each province kind of decides on its own, well, succession is now being, let's use succession as an example. If you had that in South Africa, then the provinces can decide independently what kind of investors or industry they want to attract, and they can lower tax rates and make adjustments accordingly, and they can compete against each other. You'll see this country booming, because then you've got lots more competition. But because we're going for this go slow communism, very burdensome, overtly regulated BEE, bad labor law kind of vibe, if I'm an investor or I've got some money lying there, I'm like, South Africa, and then versus any other country, I'm like, fuck that. And now they're burning down the farms and all of that, the farm murders. I'd be like, fuck this basket case. I'm taking my money somewhere else where I can actually get a good return on investment. But it really goes beyond me these days why capitalism is the enemy. If anything, capitalism has reduced the global poverty line in the last 10, 20 years. Like, it's no one's business. These, I call them the poverty porn merchants. That always, the Gini coefficient et al., where they always talk about equality, they had to readjust the daily most poor countries, the amount that they earn every year, because the world is becoming more prosperous through capitalism. Now, we are excluding Venezuela and Zimbabwe, these countries that fucking love communism. That's their own problem. And we see how it ends.
I think the problem that people have with capitalism is they don't understand the term, and they confuse it with corporatism, which is not cool. I mean, corporatism is like, going all out. You don't care about the people around you. You don't care about the environment. You are just chasing money, and you don't care who gets left behind and who gets trampled on. That is not capitalism. Capitalism gives you the means and the opportunity to create your own wealth. And me, as a 9-to-5 office worker, can't really see why people who don't want to take the opportunity to enrich themselves. I mean, being your own boss is not actually that easy as it may sound, but you are in control of your own finances. You get to decide how you want to spend the day. If you are a subsistence farmer, you have to work or you don't eat. And if you are an entrepreneur, you have to go out and see clients or you don't get the contract. If you're an office worker like me, a salaried worker, you have much less control over where your money goes, because pay as you earn gets subtracted before you even get your paycheck. I am not an entrepreneur. I cannot just quit my job and start working for myself. Some people actually have to do the desk jobs. But when you are poor and living in a township and you have a brilliant idea, in the townships are largely, unregulated, unpoliced by the state. I think it's mostly gangs that's controlling them, but they can actually sustain themselves. If somebody comes up with an idea, nothing is stopping them from starting an informal business. Just you don't even have to register it with the government. Just put up your stall or speak to people about what your idea is and see if you can get some angel investors. Nothing is stopping people from doing that.
They ironically, let's kind of classify them. They kind of become these anarchy societies because there's no government, no police, no state, no red tape. They're kind of left to their own devices. And they actually, ironically, are the freest of free markets on a very small scale, because there's no state asking them for levies or for anything. They're just this community that popped up in most cases, and they're very rural, some of them, and they just go on. But also the drawback is there's not a lot of prospects or like you say investors, but you're not going to get a Bill Gates type like throwing millions into there. It's people
not.
on that scale investing in each other on a communal level, almost like crowdfunding stuff. Like, we need something, let's crowdfund it and let's get it done. We see a lot of,
If you think that you have green fingers, you can make things grow, but you don't have the tools to make yourself planters, but you have a buddy that can work with pallets. You and your buddy, you club together. He makes growing boxes for you, and you get another buddy that maybe can get some fertilizer and some topsoil or whatever. And you start a community garden, or you start your own garden in your own backyard or front yard or wherever you think your vegetables might be safe, and you can grow tomatoes. And you can sell your tomatoes, and you can split the profit between you and your soil buddy and the pallet guy. And then from there on, your business can grow. You can expand into potatoes, and you can maybe buy a small plot of land, and you can, start farming, because food is your basic necessity. Everybody needs food.
Yeah, and in those societies, you'll find a lot of bartering and trading as well. It won't always be money that you're making, but you can trade resource for resource. So it becomes interesting.
Bartering is fantastic.
Yes,
I would definitely like to see, when the economy absolutely crashes, that you can barter with stuff. Money is just a convenient go-between, because I can't provide a service or a product that you want, but I can give you money. And you can then change that money into something else. So
for sure,
bartering is great. When all goes to hell, I've got alcohol to barter.
There we go. Maryke, I see we've got about 8 minutes left. So if you want to, if you want to maybe start closing down, we'll take a few questions and wrap this bad boy up.
Okay, so back to the sci-fi books. I would recommend reading Foundation by Isaac Asimov. It's a great book about what happens when a civilization becomes too powerful. 1984 is definitely recommended reading. Well, although that's kind of like, current affairs now. Brave New World, which basically, I saw a comment earlier about cloning. That's like genetic manipulation to make alpha and beta people and assign them personalities.
We've got enough beta people. We need fucking alphas. Have you seen the BLM supporters, Maryke? They lived in their parents' basements for decades. They're pale, they're malnourished, they smell Cheetos all day.
They're not even beta. They're more like way down, like iota or something.
Yes.
The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein is one of my absolutely favorite libertarian books. If you read it, you definitely get the libertarian vibe. It's basically they sent convicts to the moon, and the convicts' descendants started they became their own civilization, and they got tired of feeding the earth. They had to, because on the moon there's lots of farmland underground, so all of the earth's food came from the moon, but the people on the moon still had to abide by earth rules, which is ridiculous because they've got their own society now and their own habits. So they just staged the revolt and gained their independence. So definitely read that one. Puppet Master is another excellent one by, I think it was also Robert Heinlein. It is basically, it happens kind of in reverse of what we're seeing now. There's these slugs that came to infect people, and this giant space slug was stuck on your back. So underneath your clothes, you couldn't see it. So in order to combat this, the government first told the people that you're not allowed to wear a t-shirt or a jacket. Men had to be topless. They can wear trousers only, and women had to wear a halterneck so that you can know that the slug isn't on there. But the slugs got clever, and they eventually went into the trousers. So people had to be naked, and they were normalized into wearing less and less and less clothes, where we are being normalized to wearing your mask every day and everywhere. And eventually, yes, the slugs took over, and there was something. They tried to rule the earth and get our resources. But yes, that's definitely something to read, to see how people react in a crisis, and how government reacts to a crisis. I mean, are you going to believe the government? Are you going to believe some rogue agent who's actually telling the truth? Can the government trust other government agencies? It's
like Count van Tottenkopf. I just want to give him credit. Count is like, isn't there slugs generally under trousers? And yes, you're right, Count. That's on point. Touche.
So yeah, we didn't even get to the movies, but the movies is a lot more specific on the socialism aspect, and the good guys standing up to the bad guys, to the system. Something like the Hunger Games. And the thing that you always see in these movies is there's only two classes. There's the ruling elite, and there's the poor people being exploited. There's nobody in the middle. There's no voice of reason. The voice of reason is here below. And this poor person has to do everything in their power to convince the other people that, listen, there's something better than what these people have in mind for us. Divergent is the same. Equilibrium is the same. These people deciding what's best for these people. And that's nonsense, because these people don't live by these rules. They live with a different set of rules. So there can never be equality in a socialist system. Just because there's people ruling over you, you will never be equal to the people above you.
I'll add to that, and I'll say there can never be equality, period. Even if you take everything away now from everyone, within a year or two, everyone starts at zero. There will be inequality within the next year, because people are more resourceful. And the reason why we are so awesome and cool and innovative is because we are different. And it's not a goddamn sim to be different. It's awesome. It's taken us, it's brought us to where we are. There are very few people, the Elon Musks, the Einsteins, the Marconis, the Teslas out there. Very few people actually that propels us forward. If you think about it, there aren't a lot of them. Think about how many people can completely manufacture a mobile phone or know how to do it. Very few people can do that. So there are a handful of geniuses, and they come in every few generations, and they fucking propel us forward. That's not a common thing. We aren't as great as we think we are. On the norm, you get people that go and they've got a salary job, they've got a very basic job, and they do a lot of basic things. Not shutting them down, because we do need plumbers, we do need electricians. I've got a lot of respect for tradespeople, by the way, and for scientists like Maryke, but I don't have a lot of respect for someone that has a fucking degree or an honors in gender studies, because they're contributing fuck all to society, and they're adding to the trouble, to critical race theory and other bullshit that we don't need. Because currently in the world, critical race theory, postmodernism, is dividing people on such a rate and scale that it's scary. And it's these toxic ideologies that doesn't allow for one to redeem oneself, come back, or anything. And it plays onto that perpetual victimhood bullshit. And it takes away agency from people at the end of the day, where I say, fuck it. If you teach someone how to do something and do it well, they can pull themselves up and you give them the means. they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they don't have to be fucking poor the rest of their lives and get handouts and welfare. Welfare is toxic. It's one of the worst things ever.
Yes, it makes people lazy.
There we go. You're incentivizing laziness, and that's bad. And that's actually, I'll touch on a controversial one before we end the stream. Is I'm actually a big fan of birth control. I'll say it. I'll actually say, I'll go as far as to say we can all be sterile. You have to go through a psychometric test. You have to have the means to support. You have to pre-budget before you have children. You have to be, like I said, psychologically able, and then you can have children. I think the way the world works now, everyone is popping out children left, right, and center, and then we get lots of we know what products of children, what caliber of children we get.
Basically apply for a license to procreate and submit your most recent payslips and 3 months bank statement.
Yeah, I feel like that. I know people are going to shit on me for this, but just seeing what kind of people the EFF and the ANC have delivered their fans, I've just decided it's time maybe that we don't procreate so much, because it doesn't end well. Maryke, on a final note.
I just want to go 5 minutes more on the population control thing, which is also a big thing in science fiction. There was this one book, The Forever War, which they basically engineered people to be homosexual because the galaxy was too full. So the natural tendency was to be gay. And if you are actually straight, you're kind of like an anomaly. But nobody judged you for that because, if that's the way you swing, then that's the way you swing. But there's a great movie called What Happened to Monday, which basically covers all these things. A ruling elite, overpopulation, genetically modified food. Did I say population control? So basically, the way that story goes is the Earth was running out of food, so they invested more into GMO crops that could grow faster and feed more people with less food. But the downside of this was the women became much more fertile. They were popping out twins and triplets and quadruplets. So they had a population problem again. And they instituted this one-child policy. And if you have twins, you had to choose one. The other one went into storage. If you had a second child, the government came to take your child away. Same if you had a third one or a fourth one. So once again, there's that government interference into people's lives, and gotta watch that movie. It's a great movie.
Yeah. So Maryke, I think we'll definitely have a sci-fi chat again. We'll see if I think there's a lot of themes to cover in the sci-fi world, and I'll definitely be keen if you are as well. Come back. We can maybe get the third person in that's also a sci-fi enthusiast, and we can bash this one out again.
Yes, that would be great.
Excellent. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And Maryke, thanks for joining us tonight. Everyone, have a good evening and stay safe. It's an absolute pleasure. Bye-bye.